Welcome to reality. You're now on the Code of Mind channel. Today we will talk about quantum physics, about what is actually happening in science, why scientists are increasingly talking about new states of matter, nonlinear time, and probabilistic reality, and why this year is more and more often mentioned as a turning point, not on the calendar but in the understanding of how the world is structured. Over the past few years, quantum physics has stopped being a narrow field for theorists. It has entered computation, modeling of reality and technology, and along with that, it has begun to directly concern the human being. We no longer live in a model of a solid world where everything is predictable and linear. We live in a system where the observer influences the outcome, and the state matters more than the form. When people say that 2026 is a transition, it is important to immediately remove all mysticism from that phrase. This is not about prophecies, not about sacred dates, and not about theories. It is about the accumulated effect of a moment when several independent processes begin to overlap with each other. In physics, such moments are called threshold moments. A system can look stable for a long time, but at a certain level of tension, it shifts into a different mode of operation, because the old mode can no longer withstand the load. This is exactly what scientists are now observing simultaneously in different fields. In geophysics, an increase in anomalous resonance spikes is being recorded, instability of the Earth's magnetic field, growth in the number of synchronous processes occurring in parallel in different parts of the planet, and an increase in the number of weak but constant disturbances instead of rare but strong ones. The Schumann resonance, the basic electromagnetic frequency between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, is increasingly going beyond its familiar corridors of values. Scientists are talking about a redistribution of energy in the Earth-Sun magnetosphere system. The human being is not an external observer. The human being is an embedded element of this system. Our nervous system evolved within a specific electromagnetic and frequency range. The brain, hormonal regulation, sleep, attention, emotional stability. All of this directly depends on the background conditions of the environment. Therefore, changes in the surrounding system cannot pass by the human being unnoticed. This explains a strange but widespread set of symptoms that has been observed in recent years all over the world, regardless of culture, country, or lifestyle. Subjective sensations of accelerated time, as if weeks are merging together. Emotional swings without obvious external causes. An increase in anxiety states or, on the contrary, a feeling of emptiness and apathy. A decline in motivation toward old goals. A sense that familiar life scenarios no longer produce results. It is important to understand, this is not a mental disorder and not a mass awakening. It is cognitive adaptation to an environment that has become more complex, denser, and faster. The brain, like any computational processor, is optimized for a certain load. When the flow of signals, decisions, and uncertainties exceeds the familiar level, the system either restructures itself or begins to malfunction. That is why many people feel that old ways of thinking no longer work, that automatic reactions lead to worse outcomes, and that more awareness is required even in simple things. This is not a personal crisis. This is a moment when the cognitive model of the world has become outdated, while a new one has not yet fully formed. In this sense, 2026 is not a point of an event, but a point of realization. A moment when it becomes obvious, reality is no longer linear, time is no longer felt as uniform, and stability is no longer achieved by force, only by precision. And from this moment, the conversation about quantum physics stops being abstract, because it describes the world in which we already live. We are used to thinking that the world consists of objects, house, body, money, work, events, as if these are separate things that exist on their own. But quantum physics has been carefully undermining this picture for more than 100 years. At a deep level, reality behaves differently. Particles are not the bricks of the universe. They do not exist as stable objects before interaction. Quantum theory shows that what is primary is not things, but the relationships between them. Modern physics increasingly speaks not about particles, but about states, phases, configurations, and rules of interaction. In recent years, studies have appeared on so-called exotic phases of matter, states where there are no familiar particles, no solid forms, but there is a stable structure of connections. Simply put, matter begins to resemble code rather than substance. If we speak in simple terms, the world becomes similar to a game where what matters is not who you are, but which mode you are in, not what you have, but how you interact with the system. And remarkably, this coincides with what people are experiencing en masse on a psychological level. Previously, changing one's life required time, effort, and the accumulation of resources. Now many notice a strange thing. A shift in internal state produces an effect faster than external actions. This is a consequence of the fact that complex systems are sensitive to initial conditions. In physics, this is known as the effect of small changes. In a complex environment, a minimal shift in a parameter can lead to a completely different trajectory. A human being is also a complex system. When the internal mode of attention, expectations, emotional background, and level of tension changes, the way you interact with reality changes. You begin to notice different possibilities, make different decisions, react differently, and enter different chains of events. And in the conditions of an accelerated, dense environment, this begins to manifest much faster than before. In essence, reality becomes less inert. It responds more quickly to changes in input parameters. That is why today many people feel that state is more important than effort, clarity is more important than pressure, and precision is more important than force. This is the psychological analog of ultra-quantum matter, a world where what is primary is not forms but settings. When people talk about multidimensionality, imagination immediately draws parallel universes, portals, and alternative versions of Earth from movies. But in real science, everything is much quieter, and precisely because of that, much more interesting. Quantum mechanics does not originally operate with worlds. It works with probabilities. Any quantum system, before the moment of measurement, exists not in one state, but in a set of possible states simultaneously. This is called superposition, and for a long time it was believed that such effects were only possible for elementary particles. But experiments of recent years, including work with nanoparticles, molecular interferometry, and macroscopic quantum states, show that the more complex the system, the longer it can maintain uncertainty. In other words, reality at a deep level does not choose in advance. It allows multiple scenarios at the same time until interaction occurs. If we translate this to the human level, the conclusion becomes very concrete. We do not live in a single rigidly defined line of events, but in a field of probabilities. And there is no esotericism here. Every day you encounter situations where different outcomes are possible. The result depends not only on facts but also on reaction. A minimal decision changes the trajectory. In quantum logic, measurement is not observation with the eyes. It is interaction that makes one option real and leaves the others unrealized. Such a measurement becomes a choice, attention, an emotional reaction, a decision made in a specific state. Focus of attention is not a metaphor. It is an active parameter of the system. When you concentrate on a certain interpretation of events, you strengthen exactly the branch in which that interpretation is confirmed. That is why many people today notice an effect. Decisions produce consequences faster, small actions change direction more strongly than before, and, "I'll figure it out later," no longer works. The environment has become more sensitive. In complex systems, this is called feedback amplification. The denser and faster the system, the faster it responds to changes in input data. That is why the period of instability feels like an acceleration of time, because there are fewer gaps between action and consequence. Under such conditions, the illusion of safe inaction disappears. Previously, it was possible to remain in uncertainty for a long time. Now uncertainty begins to collapse on its own, sometimes not in the most convenient direction. This is practical multidimensionality. Not worlds somewhere else, but different versions of development right here, depending on how you enter the situation. And the key skill in such a reality is not control, but awareness of the moment of choice. Because every choice is not just a decision, but an act of measurement that makes one version of reality real. Quantum entanglement is one of those phenomena that still defies classical logic. It violates the familiar picture of a world where everything is separated by distance, time, and sequence. In a quantum system, the state of one part can be rigidly connected to the state of another, even if kilometers, vacuum, and the absence of direct interaction lie between them. This is not theory. It is a fact confirmed by experiments and already used today in quantum cryptography, quantum computing, modeling of complex molecules and chemical reactions, and the development of next-generation algorithms. But if we remove the laboratory language, a question arises. What if complex systems are also capable of a form of entanglement? Our society is an ultra-complex system. Billions of nodes connected by information, emotions, fears, expectations, and reactions. And in recent decades, the density of these connections has grown exponentially. The internet, social networks, 24/7 news cycles, instant transmission of emotions. All of this has sharply reduced the distance between people. Not physical distance, but informational distance. And here an effect begins to manifest that is very similar to entanglement. Emotional waves spread almost instantly. Anxiety arises synchronously in different countries. The same topics flare up simultaneously in millions of minds. Crises are felt not locally, but as a global background. This no longer looks like coincidence. In the theory of complex systems, it is known that the higher the density of connections, the stronger the collective effects. The system begins to behave as a whole, rather than as the sum of individual elements. That is why today, the mood of society changes abruptly. Polarization intensifies and reactions become extreme. Individual state becomes harder to maintain separately. Personal experience increasingly becomes part of a general resonance, hence the subjective feeling. My state influences the environment more strongly than before. This is the effect of high connectivity. When the system is dense, even a small shift in one node is amplified through the network of connections. Like in an overloaded power grid, a small impulse can cause a cascade. That is why today it is especially important to understand the difference between personal emotion, induced state, and collective background. Many people experience not their own feelings, but a response to the overall tension of the system. This explains the strange fatigue, anxiety without a clear cause, the feeling of pressure coming from nowhere. Entanglement in this context is not about mystical unity. It is about responsibility for the state you are in, because in a dense system, calm stabilizes, panic amplifies chaos, clarity reduces noise, and that is why the last few years have so sharply exposed people's internal processes. Previously, it was possible to live on autopilot for decades, learn the rules, integrate, repeat them, and the system would hold. Today, autopilot begins to fail because the environment has become more sensitive to state. And here is the main turning point. Less automatic reactions, more conscious choice. An automatic reaction is when reality presses a button and you respond with a pre-prepared script. Offended, snapped, pitied, repeated, got scared, hid, postponed, lost, irritation, conflict, burnout, emptiness. In the old version of the world, this could drag on for a long time. In the new cycle, it collapses faster. And the winner is not the one who is right, but the one who can stop a second before the reaction and choose a response. Not hand control over to an external irritant. The modern world does not kill a person with heaviness. It kills with overload. You can be smart, strong, motivated, and still fall apart inside because your brain is constantly processing news, feeds, other people's emotions, other people's opinions, comparisons, fears, forecasts. This creates cognitive entropy, internal chaos that feels normal, but actually consumes your resources. That is why today's field is a mode where you begin to live not by the amount of information, but by the quality of attention. In an unstable environment, the one who wins is the one who holds the center, because the center is the point from which you make decisions without panic. See the picture more broadly. Do not get infected by the external background, and do not become a conduit for chaos. The one who lives by reactions truly gets lost because reactions are not controlled by them. Reactions are controlled by the environment. Watch your reactions and your attention. This is the hygiene of consciousness. Thank you for being with me on this channel. I wish you the best possible branch of reality. Subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Take care.